October 22nd is a good day if you're the id. Not so great if you're a believer in free will, truth, and human dignity. Because it was on October 22nd in 1899 that the first advanced copies of Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams appeared. Now, they didn't change the fortunes of either the publishing house or the author in the short run. They printed 600 copies and it took them years to sell. But then in the 1920s, Freud's theories took off and they played a major role in making the 20th century the age of relativism. Now, Freud's theories are complicated. They change a lot, and the popular understanding undoubtedly oversimplified. Basically, the notion was everything is secretly about sex, quite possibly with your own mother. And this popular understanding, though simplified, captured the essence of it. And Freud's theories were debased, and critically, they suggested that conscious thought was an illusion, a deceit, not of other people but of yourself, over impulses that were primeval, impossible to control, and in fact impossible to understand. In his wonderful history of the 20th century, Modern Times, Paul Johnson talks about the way in which two quite separate intellectual influences helped convince people that everything's relative. One was Freud, who really was arguing that if there was truth, we could never get at it, and if we did get at it, it would be ugly anyway. The other one was Einstein and his theory of relativity, which was empirically confirmed around the time of the First World War. Now, Einstein's theory of relativity, in fact, had nothing to do with everything being relative. It had to do with the necessity to calculate absolute position, absolute velocity, and so on in a more complex framework than we'd understood. But that didn't matter because nobody read Einstein, except physicists, and anybody who tried didn't understand it. But they all thought, okay, here's a guy with a brain so enormous that he eats E equals mc squared for breakfast, and he said everything is relative, man. You put that in with the disillusionment about Western civilization, about truth, about religion, about patriotism, about all the old verities in the 1920s, and along comes Freud. And as Marshall McLuhan would later put it, the basic idea of his theories is that we're like a double boiler. You know, we're all steamed up, but we don't know what's cooking. And it got into popular culture to such an extent that if you read Will Durant's popularization of the story of philosophy, he says, and this is written in the 1920s, that philosophy is to history as to reason is to desire. It's a reflection of unconscious processes. And what that means is that what people think is true, philosophy, is driven somehow by forces of history they don't grasp, just as what they believe in their personal lives is driven by the forces of the id, sexual impulses, rage, all kinds of atavistic things we don't even know about. That's where we're all steamed up and we don't know what's cooking. Now, if that's true, of course, there's no point trying to understand philosophy because your attempts to reason about it are themselves just the product of dark forces. Why Durant would go and write books claiming this, I don't know. Why professors would go around saying there is no truth, I don't know. And they never seem to believe it on payday. But the fact is that as a result of these kind of ideas, people stopped believing in truth. They stopped believing in free will because, of course, we can't control our impulses. We can't even understand them. They stopped believing in human dignity because we're basically just a bunch of monkeys jumping around pretending and fooling ourselves. So they thought you might as well go for hedonism, the natural complement of relativism. And so you get a 20th century, and I'm sorry, a 21st as well, at least so far, in which people think since you can't understand what's going on, you might as well have a good time. The fact that we're not having a good time is another problem that we'll get to in due course. But first we have to stop believing in Sigmund Freud, because if you do believe Sigmund Freud, you can't believe Sigmund Freud because he tells you all your ideas are illusions, including your analysis of the interpretation of dreams. It's rather a pity that entire first one wasn't remaindered long before anybody started to take it seriously.